co-founder and the head of sales. Yes, so, I wanted to discuss the risks of DeFi, because a lot of people are kind of asking, is it safe? And I thought a great project to kind of look at the different stacks of risks in DeFi would be pulled together. And pulled together because they say they are a no-loss protocol, and so I wanted to kind of get into what no-loss really means. Quickly, before I move to that, just so you know who we are, so ChainSecurity, we do smart contract audits for big DeFi protocol. We work with Maker, Compound, Curve, Yearn, Lido, kind of all of the big ones. And I am not myself an auditor, I'm auditor adjacent. So I'll do my best to kind of convey this in a way that's easier to understand how an engineer would say it. And yeah, if you have any deeper technical questions, I'm always happy to connect you with our engineers. All right, so pull together. What does no loss really mean? So first, let's take a quick look at what pull together is. So the idea would be, instead of placing your money on like a savings account or something like that, where you would get maybe 1% interest rate, you would kind of get this in a pool. So you would kind of put your savings with other people's savings, and the interest rates, instead of going to each person, would actually be pooled, and then you have a price. It's like a lottery. You have a chance of winning all the interest of everybody. So it's kind of more exciting, right? Instead of having a sure way of getting $1, you have maybe $1,000. So that's kind of exciting. And they say it's a no-loss protocol. And by no loss, it doesn't mean no risk, of course. It means that there is no market risk. So if crypto goes up or down, you're not going to lose your money because this is denominated in USDC. But there are risks, and this is what I'll talk about today. There's the smart contract risk, phishing risk, and some other risks that I'm going to be talking about. And I like to separate this into two types of risks. The ones that you don't have a choice, actually. If you want to interact with DeFi, you're going to bear these risks. But then there are risks that you can do something about. In terms of the inherent risk, I think it's interesting to go into how that really works. Because basically what Pool Together does is they take your money and the money of all the other people who invest in this pool, and they put this in Aave. So Aave, which gives you interests on your money like a traditional savings account would do. And so there you have the first risk, is that if Aave has an issue, so there could be a smart contract issue, there could be a bug in the smart contracts. For this, you have people like us. But there could also be an economic risk. And I don't know if you've heard of liquidations issues in DeFi. So in the case of Aave, it's the same with Maker and all the other big lending protocols. You're going to have over-collateralized loans. So here we put an example. If you have $1,000 of Aave, you can deposit this and then get a loan for 650 USDC. So this is kind of a ratio to say that, okay, there's going to be more money in the protocol, that money that has been borrowed, and this kind of ensures the financial health, the economic health of the system. But then, what happens if the price of Aave drops? Then you're not going to have $1,000 of Aave anymore. You're going to have less, which means that the collateralization ratio, it's not going to be respected anymore, right? There's going to be too much debt in the system. And because of that, the position is going to be liquidated automatically. So this money is going to be sold to recover the debt, to refund the debt. So normally, that should work well. But as we've seen, and I don't know if you remember maybe at the, when the COVID crisis kind of hit and the market tanked really quickly, you had a diminution of like 50% of the price of ETH, and right away that triggered kind of all these very heavy liquidations, and then that was an issue for the health of the protocol. So this is one risk typically that you see in most of the DeFi ecosystem, is this liquidation risk, this cascading liquidation risks. So if you are doing anything in DeFi which interacts with the lending protocol, this is a risk that you're going to have to face. Now, another risk is the oracle risk. So typically, I mentioned before, you have this price of Aave, right? And this price of Aave, or any other collateral, is used to determine the financial health of the system. It's used to determine if there is not too much debt in the system. But the smart contracts, actually, they're not that smart, right? They need to receive the information, what is the price of this token that is the collateral? And they do that via an oracle. One of the most used oracle in the system, in the ecosystem, is Chainlink, which is kind of industry standard. And so what they do, you have a lot of information sources which are going to check on exchanges, which are going to check kind of everywhere and see, okay, what is the price of Aave at this moment? And then they're going to send this data to Aave or to the protocol in question. And if then the price drops, that is going to trigger a liquidation, right? But again, this is another vector that could be attacked, right? You could have, all the people who relay this information, they could be malicious. They could plan an attack and tell the wrong price to the protocol so that afterwards they can profit with some market manipulation. They could also be just plain wrong, right? They could be just bad and receive bad information, or their own infrastructure could be compromised by other people who are malicious. So that's another risk, and another risk that's connected to that, and we've touched upon this today, is the upgradability. I don't know, have you heard this? So, we say that the blockchain is immutable and smart contracts are immutable once you deploy them. But actually, you see more and more in DeFi what we call upgradability. So you use a proxy pattern that actually you're going to be able to have a contract get instructions from another contract, and you're going to have an admin in the middle, so someone who has basically power to tell the smart contracts to use this logic instead of that logic. And so that's one of the big fake decentralization in DeFi, is this admin risk that we are talking about today. And so you have, in the worst cases, you could have one or two people who have this possibility, this power to change the smart contracts and to change what it's going to take its orders from. So this is something that is very interesting to think about. And so there was one hack of, I don't know how many millions, 600 million or something, the Ronin hack, the Axie Infinity hack, which was because there was this admin control and they hadn't kept it right. They just didn't keep the private keys correctly, and then someone was able to use this as a vulnerability. So this upgradability could be an issue if someone gets access to your private key, to your infrastructure. It could be an issue if you decide to be malicious, if you decide to rug pull your users. And so that's kind of a big issue, both on the protocol level, but also on the Oracle level, right? Because we saw, it's great, there are 19 people who check the price feeds and who communicates this. But actually, if you look at Chainlink itself, they could, with just 4 people, they could decide to use this other contract, which gives this other logic, right? So this is, again, kind of these choke points of centralization, which are kind of typically not advertised. And so this is something, this is a very famous meme. We always talk about, how you can have amazing security, very expensive and so on, and it would take so long to crack the code. But then we always talk about the $5 wrench attack, that you just hit someone on the head with a wrench until they give you the code. And that's, that's something you need to think about if you look here, how much these contracts have been accessed, so how much these keys have been used, which could be used to upgrade to something that you don't want, either because it's buggy or because it's malicious. You could see that the Chainlink admin is doing transactions every day. So if they have access to that every day, and I come hit them with a wrench, then maybe I can quite easily access this. And Chainlink, as I said before, is one of the biggest Oracle providers in the ecosystem. That is a huge choke point. This is quite interesting. I don't know if we have time. So this is a cool example where this upgradability was used for good, but it could have been used for bad. So basically, Oasis, it's a DeFi protocol. I'm not going to get into it. They have a lot of money in the smart contracts. And at some point, there was a hacker who put money in their smart contracts to profit from that money. And Oasis, the team of Oasis, received a subpoena, so received an obligation from a court that they needed to do everything they could to recover the money from this hacker. And so they were able to do an update, like I said, with this admin thing, with the multisig. They were able to do an update and steal the money from the hacker, which, again, it was good because it was the law and because it was a hacker, but that means they could have done that with anybody else's funds, right? So if they were malicious, they could have stolen the money with this upgrade. So again, this is something people maybe not know about all the time. So that was the risks. You can't do anything about. It's either you use the protocol and you know these risks exist, and you can just be an informed user. You can read, smart contract audits in general. The smart contract audits are going to explain you if there's this upgradability possibility, if there are backdoors, if there's anything, you should see that. But yeah, it's kind of either you interact with them or you don't. Now, phishing, I want to end on something more positive, something that you can actually protect yourself from. So phishing is like the biggest and most common risk, is the biggest probability of losing your money is actually through phishing. And you can see, for example, if you want to use for the first time a DeFi protocol, if you type it, or if you type MetaMask, you're going to see most of the Google ads on top are going to be fake. There's going to be some sort of a typo, and it's going to take you somewhere, steal your keys, steal your funds. So that's one thing that's really, really important, is to make sure you're always going to the right URL. But unfortunately, even if you go on the right URL, sometimes the front end of a project could be compromised, which happened with Curve at some point. And this is unfortunately something that it's very unlucky if that happens, But what you can do, in case even the front end is compromised, is when you're going to make a transaction, when you're going to sign a transaction to send your fund on a DeFi protocol, if you use a hardware wallet, I mean, Ledger is now under some sort of an assault. I'm not going to get into that. But if you use a hardware wallet, you're going to see the address on which you're going to send the fund. You're going to see this on the little screen, right? The contract address. And this is something you can go on Etherscan. You can go and check, okay, this contract, how long has it been deployed? If you want to interact with a project that has lived for 5 years and the contract has been deployed yesterday, it's not the right contract. If you see that it's a contract that's not verified and so on. So this is something you can do. You go on Etherscan and you control that the contract address is the same. Unlimited approval is something that sometimes you're going to be offered. It's better to approve each transaction as you do it and verify the contract address and put a limit to what you want to do. So, the risk that we discussed, just to kind of summarize it a little bit. So we have Pool Together itself, right? What risk could you have in Pool Together? You can have smart contract risks, a buggy smart contract, which is going to be exploited. But then it rests on other things, and that's something really with DeFi. Don't forget that it's the composability of DeFi is great, but also all the risks are compounding, right? So Pool Together, if there's no issue, good. Maybe there's going to be an issue with Aave. Maybe there's going to be cascading liquidations, and Aave is going to have an issue and your money is going to be lost, right? Maybe Aave is going to have an issue with Chainlink, with the oracles. Maybe the oracles are going to be buggy. Maybe they're going to be, malicious. This is something you don't know. I didn't talk about USDC, but USDC could also have, all sorts of issues. They also have their own oracles. It could depeg and so on and so on. Now, if we look on the right side, you also have the chain, of course, right? So here, Pool Together, so most of the pools are on optimism. Optimism could have an issue. We actually have this multi-sig problem. We have that with most of the layer 2s, unfortunately. You have also these choke points where a few admins have quite a lot of power. So that's something you can check. You were mentioning L2Beat. I think it was you or one of your co-panelists. You could check L2Beat to see kind of the health and the decentralization of these layer 2s. But don't be mistaken. If there is a layer 2, if there's a gain in throughput, then something in general comes from somewhere. Then, of course, this all works on Ethereum. Ethereum has to work. It could have all the problems that we know. And then, of course, your front end, your wallet, could be MetaMask, could be some issues with the URL. In conclusion, when we say there's no loss, that doesn't mean no risk. There's never no risk. There's always so much risk in DeFi. Yeah, something that really I'd like you to remember after this presentation is kind of this multi-sig upgradability kind of issues. The contracts can be updated, and this is the case for most DeFi protocols. So this is something that you should be aware of. And also the fact that the risks are stacked on top of each other. One risk is acceptable, but then if you see in the stack below, in the layer below, maybe it is not, right? And you can protect, so that's the message of hope for the end of the presentation. You can protect yourself from the most likely ones. Always make sure who you're interacting with, the right contract address, and the right URL. That was it for me. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Emilie.